All right, so get ready because today we're diving deep.
Into French grammar.
You got it.
Ooh, excited.
It is. And specifically, we're tackling plural nouns and how to make sure everything in your sentence agrees.
Like a beautifully tuned orchestra.
I love that analogy. And you know what? If you're working towards that pronunciator certificate, well, this deep dive.
This is going to be your cheat sheet.
It really is to help you navigate the library module in that app. So
yeah, we're going to break it all down.
Let's do it. Let's start with the foundation, shall we? So the most common way to create a plural in French, I think we all know this.
Tack on an S.
Right? Just like in English, right?
Exactly.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Like if we have the word chat, meaning one cat, we just add that S and boom, chats. We've got a whole bunch of cats. But
of course, French wouldn't be French without some little,
twists and turns.
Exactly.
So what happens with nouns ending in EO or O?
Well, they like to be a little fancy.
Ooh la la.
Exactly. So instead of taking an S for the plural, they take an X.
Oh, interesting.
For example, one game is un jeu, but many games would be jeu.
Jeu, exactly.
Got it. So a little X action instead of the S. Okay, now what about those nouns ending in al? They always trip me up. And then L, too.
Those are tricky ones.
Yeah.
So for al, when you make it plural, you drop that al and you replace it with o. So one horse is un cheval.
Right.
But several horses, more horsepower would be...
Okay, chevaux.
Chevaux.
Got it.
So al becomes o. Okay, I'm writing this down. This is good stuff.
Yeah.
Now, okay, let's talk about those words that end in S, X, or even Z. Did they even change in the plural? It's almost like they already look plural, right?
It's kind of like they're already plural enough. They're like, leave us alone, we're good. So you're right.
So they stay the same.
They often stay the same.
That's nice. At least we get a little break there, right?
Like le bras.
Le main.
There.
They stay. Okay, les bras. For multiple arms. Easy. Okay, so we've talked about single words, but what happens with those compound nouns, the ones that have multiple words kind of mushed together? Like, do both parts change in the plural?
It depends on the word and their relationship to each other.
Ooh, tell me more.
So, for example, if you have grand-mère.
Grandmother.
Exactly. The plural would be grand-mère.
Yeah.
So both parts change to reflect.
Right, because you have multiple grandmothers.
Exactly. But if you have a word like arc-en-ciel, which is rainbow,
okay,
typically only the first part changes. So it would be arc-en-ciel for multiple rainbows.
Oh, interesting. So the en ciel part just stays put.
Stays put.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's both, sometimes it's just the first. It's French grammar, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, I know we can't talk about French plurals without addressing those irregular plurals, right? There are always exceptions.
Always.
I bet there are some pretty crazy ones in French, right?
Oh, yeah, there are some fun ones. And you probably already know some of them. Because think about mesdames.
Right. The formal way to address a woman.
Exactly. To make that plural, all you do is change the article. So it becomes mesdames.
Mesdames, okay.
And monsieur, same thing.
So it becomes messieurs.
Monsieur, exactly.
Okay, so it's not the noun itself that changes, it's the article in front. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
And what other kind of wacky, irregular plurals are lurking out there?
Well, some of them look like they've been through the spelling bee blender.
Okay, give me an example.
You have a word like you for I, which becomes you in the plural.
You, wow, okay.
And then there's ale, meaning garlic, which turns into als. And ciel for sky changes to su.
Su. Okay, so yeah, those are definitely not following any kind of predictable pattern, are they? Those are just, gotta memorize them, I guess.
Yeah, some of them you just gotta kind of memorize, but even in their irregularity, there's kind of a beauty to them.
Right. There's a pattern even within the chaos. Okay, so we've got those crazy irregular plurals. Now, what about nouns that end in eon? Are they mostly regular?
Most of them, you just add that S like we talked about.
Okay, good.
But of course, there are a few little rebels.
I figured.
Like crayon.
Becomes crayons.
In the plural.
Crayons. Okay, so just a handful to watch out for. That's not too bad.
Not too bad.
But, it makes me think this is where the Pronunciator app comes in handy, right? Because it could really drill us on all these different forms.
Absolutely. That library module is a great resource.
Yeah. And speaking of practice, what's even more crucial than just knowing how to form a plural? It's making sure that everything else in your sentence agrees.
Everything's got to be in harmony.
Right. It's like a dance.
A well-choreographed dance.
Exactly. So let's break down this agreement dance.
Okay.
First up, adjective agreement.
Okay.
What do we need to remember about making those adjectives play nice with our plural nouns.
So adjectives in French are kind of like chameleons. They have to match the noun they're describing in both gender and number. So it's a double check system to make sure everything is in harmony.
I love it. Okay, so if we have les robes,
the dresses,
right, which is plural and feminine, our adjective also needs to be plural and feminine. So we get
les robes rouges.
Okay, la robe rouge for the red dresses.
Exactly.
Got it. So that elles sont rouges is matching the plural feminine form of robes.
Exactly.
Okay, it's like they're holding hands grammatically.
I love that.
Now, what about verbs? Do they need to join this agreement party?
Oh, absolutely. Verbs got to get in on the action.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So a singular subject needs a singular verb, and a plural subject
Needs a plural.
needs a plural verb. And in the present tense, it's pretty intuitive, like je parle
I speak.
versus nous parlons.
We speak.
Exactly.
Right, so that ons ending is the plural marker for the verb. But I'm guessing things get a bit trickier with those compound tenses, right? The ones with multiple parts.
Yes. You got to be a little more careful with those compound tenses.
Oh boy, here we go.
But don't worry, we'll break it down.
Okay, good.
So with a compound tense like the passé composé, for example, you have to make sure that the auxiliary verb agrees with the subject. So for example, elles ont chanté.
They sang.
On agrees with.
Elle, exactly. But chanter, the past participle, stays the same.
Okay, so it's that auxiliary verb, the helping verb, that has to agree.
That carries the agreement.
Got it. Okay, so even in those more complex tenses, we're still focused on making sure the verb is aligned with its subject.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm feeling good about this. Now, what about those little words that can sometimes trip us up? Things like partitive articles and possessive adjectives. Do those need to be part of the agreement dance too?
They do. They do. Those little words, they can be tricky, but they're so important for making your French sound really smooth and natural. So let's start with those partitive articles, like du, de la, de. Those are used when we're talking about quantities, right? Like some of something.
Exactly. Imagine you're at a French bakery and there's a big basket of croissants.
Ooh, croissant.
And you want some, but you don't want the whole basket.
Right. Just a few.
That's when you would use the partitive article.
The
Des. Exactly. So with plural nouns, you always use des, regardless of the gender.
des croissants. Okay.
Des fruits, some fruit. Des légumes, some vegetables.
Okay, so des becomes our best friend for plural nouns and partitive articles. Got it. Now, what about those possessive adjectives? Those words like mon, ma, and notre that show ownership. Do those change when we're dealing with plural nouns?
They got to keep things in sync, so they do change.
So they do agree.
They agree in number with the noun they're describing.
Got it.
So if you're talking about our books, it would be nos livres.
Nos livres.
Where nos is the plural form of notre.
Makes sense. So it's like they're saying, hey, we're a team. We both need to represent this plural idea. Okay, I love it. But what happens when you have a selective noun, like la famille, the family, which is singular, but it refers to a group of people? Does the agreement change there?
It can get a little bit flexible with collective nouns.
Ooh, flexible French grammar. I like it.
So traditionally, you would use a singular adjective.
Okay.
But more and more, people are using plural adjectives, especially to emphasize the individuals within that group.
Right.
So you might hear both la famille est grande, the family's big, kind of focusing on the family as one unit.
Right, the family as a whole.
Exactly. But you might also hear la famille sont grands. The family are big, and that's kind of highlighting the individual members.
Right. So each person within the family is big.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a little wiggle room there, depending on what we want to emphasize. And this is where, really understanding the nuances of the language can be so powerful. Now, we can't talk about agreement without bringing those pronouns into the mix. Do they have any special rules we need to keep in mind?
Of course. Pronouns, they're like the understudies of nouns.
Right, they step in.
They step in and keep the sentence flowing.
Got it.
So we've talked about possessive adjectives like mon, ma, notre, but there are also possessive pronouns, and they need to agree with the noun they're replacing.
Okay, so give me an example.
Okay, so mes livres, my books, could be replaced by les miens, mine, which is the masculine plural possessive pronoun. It's like it's saying, hey, I can represent those books all by myself.
It's taking on the plural identity of the noun it's replacing.
Exactly.
Okay, I love that. Everything has its specific role. Now, what about demonstrative pronouns? Those words like celui-ci, this one, and cela, that one. Do they change in the plural?
Absolutely. When we're talking about multiple things, those demonstrative pronouns need to step up their plural game too.
All right, so how do they change?
So celui-ci becomes ceci, and cela transforms into cela. Those.
Okay, cela. Got it. It's all about pointing out the right number of things, right?
Exactly.
I'm starting to see a theme here. French loves agreement.
It does.
It's like this giant puzzle where everything needs to fit together just so.
Harmony and precision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about possessive pronouns, demonstrative pronouns. What about those compound tenses? We discussed how verbs need to agree in the present tense, but what happens when we throw an auxiliary verb into the mix?
Oh, yeah, those compound tenses, those are the ones that can really trip people up.
Yeah, I always get confused about which part of the verb needs to agree. It's like double the verb, double the trouble.
It can be confusing, but let's break it down.
Okay, good.
So with compound tenses like the passé composé, the auxiliary verb, which is usually a avoir, to have, or être, to be,
Right.
that's one that needs to agree with the subject.
Okay.
The past participle usually just stays the same. It's like the auxiliary verb is the leader, setting the agreement for the whole verb phrase.
Okay, so if I'm saying they have eaten, it would be ils ont mangé,
Exact.
where ont agrees with ils.
Perfect. And then if you're using être as your auxiliary verb, like with reflexive verbs, then the past participle also has to agree with the subject in gender and number. So, for example, elles sont lavées.
They wash themselves.
Exactly. Laver agrees with a.
Okay, so compound tenses, double agreement checkpoint.
You got it.
We got to make sure that auxiliary verb agrees with the subject, and sometimes that past participle needs to agree too. It's like a double checking system to make sure everything is lined up just right.
It is. It is.
Okay. Now, before we move on, I want to touch on a few more pronouns that I know can be confusing, like tout, chaque, and lequel.
Oh, yes. Those are good ones.
Tout. Especially, it seems to have like multiple personalities. Sometimes it means all, sometimes every, sometimes everything. How do we know which form to use with plural nouns?
So tout is a little bit of a chameleon.
Yeah, it really is. But there are some rules.
Okay, good. So when tout means all, and it's followed by a plural noun, it takes the plural form tout.
Tout. Okay?
So tous les livres, all the books.
Et les livres.
Got it.
But when tout means every or each, it stays singular, even if the noun is plural. So, tout le monde, everyone, or toute la journée, all day long.
Tout le monde. Okay, so tout can be singular or plural,
It can.
depending on its mood.
Got it.
What about chaque? Does that one ever change when it's used with a plural noun?
Chaque is always singular.
Oh, okay.
Even when it's referring to a group.
Okay.
Think of it as a spotlight. It's focusing on each individual item.
Okay.
So you would say chaque livre, each book, even if you're talking about a library full of books.
Okay. Chaque livre, each book. Got it. And lastly, what about lequel? Which one? I feel like that one would have to agree with the noun it's referring to.
You are absolutely right. Lequel is a team player. It has to match the noun in gender and number.
So you have singular and plural forms. So lequel des livres, which one of the books, versus lequel des filles, which one's of the girls?
Lequel des filles. Okay. Got it. Wow. French pronouns, they really keep you on your toes. It's like a mental workout, keeping track of all these agreements. But you know what? I am starting to feel like I'm getting the hang of it. It's like this code that's slowly being deciphered.
That's the fun part.
It is. Now, we've covered a lot with pronouns, but I know there are even more out there, those indefinite pronouns, things like personne, nobody, and chacun, each one. Those always seem a bit mysterious to me when it comes to agreement.
Yeah, those indefinite pronouns, they can be tricky, but there are some clear rules.
Okay, good.
So pronouns like personne and rien, nothing, are always singular, even if they're referring to a group of people or things.
Okay.
So you would say, personne n'est venu, nobody came, even if you're talking about a whole party that didn't show up.
Personne n'est venu. Okay, so those pronouns are like the lone wolves, always singular. What about chacun? Does that follow the same pattern?
Chacun is a loner too. It's always singular, and it refers to each member of a group individually. Right. So again, like a spotlight, it's focusing on each person or thing.
Got it.
You would say, chacun a son livre. Each one has his or her book.
Chacun a son livre. Okay.
Even if you're talking about a classroom full of students.
Okay, so chacun, always singular. So we've got indefinite pronouns that can be singular or plural. It all depends on the specific pronoun and its meaning.
It does.
So we just got to know which ones are which.
Exactly. And with practice, you'll get it.
Okay, I'm feeling good about this. Now, I think we've covered a lot of ground here in this part of our deep dive. Are you ready for a little breather before we tackle the final stretch? Those advanced grammar concepts are waiting for us.
Let's do it. I'm ready for the challenge.
Welcome back. We're ready for the grand finale of our French grammar deep dive. We've covered so much already. Regular plurals, irregular plurals.
That's tricky adjectives.
Verbs, pronouns.
We've done it all.
Yeah, but hold on tight because I hear there are a few more grammar gems waiting for us.
Oh, there are. Those finer points of agreement.
Ooh, I love it.
The things that'll really make you sound like a pro.
All right, let's do it. Where do we start?
Let's talk about ordinal numbers.
Ordinal numbers. Okay.
You know, those words that tell us the order of things, like premier, first, deuxième, second.
Right. Like when I'm giving directions, take the deuxième étoile, the second street on the right. Okay, so ordinal numbers. But how do they work with plural nouns?
Well, just like adjectives, those ordinal numbers have to agree in gender and number.
Of course they do. It's French grammar.
So, le premier livre, the first book, becomes le premier livre, the first books, when we're talking about more than one.
Okay, so they follow the same agreement pattern as adjectives, making sure everything matches.
They do.
But are there any exceptions? Because I know French loves its exceptions.
There's always an exception, right?
Always.
So here's a little quirk. When the ordinal number comes before a noun that's already plural, like jour, days, or année, years,
Okay.
it stays in its singular form. So you would say les deux premières années, the first 2 years.
Les deux premières années.
Okay, so we don't say premier in that case.
We don't.
Interesting. It's like the plural noun is saying, hey, I've got this plural thing covered, you can relax. Okay, so those ordinal numbers, a few little things to watch out for. Now, what about those definite articles, those little words, le, la, les, that we see all the time?
They're everywhere.
They are. I know they changed to les for plural nouns,
Right.
but is there anything else we need to remember about their agreement?
Well, they need to agree in gender as well.
Oh, right.
So, le livre, the book, becomes les livres, the books, and la table, the table, becomes les tables, the table. It's like this little dance they do.
It is. It's easy to forget about those little words when we're so focused on all the other agreement rules. It's like a grammatical juggling act.
It is. It keeps you on your toes. It does. Okay, definite articles, check. Now, are you ready to level up and tackle something a little more challenging?
Bring it on! I'm ready.
Okay, let's talk about passive voice.
Ooh, passive voice.
Yeah, I remember struggling with that back in English class.
It can be a tricky one.
It can. So how does agreement work when we're using passive verbs with plural nouns?
Good news. It's actually pretty straightforward. The past participle just needs to agree with the subject, just like it does in other verb forms.
Okay, so if we're saying the books were read, it would be les livres ont été lus, where lu agrees with les livres.
You got it. Even when we change the voice, those basic agreement rules stay the same.
Okay, so it's all about consistency, maintaining that harmony between the different parts of the sentence.
Absolutely.
Okay, passive voice, check. I'm feeling more and more confident with all this agreement stuff. You know, it really is the heart and soul of French sentences. It's what makes them sound so elegant and natural. Speaking of elegant constructions, what about hyphenated words? We talked about compound nouns earlier, but those hyphenated words seem to have their own little set of rules when it comes to plural forms.
They do. Hyphenated words are like puzzles within puzzles.
I like that.
So usually only the main noun in a hyphenated word gets pluralized.
Okay.
So with arc-en-ciel, rainbow, arc is the important part. So that's what becomes arcs in the plural, arcs-en-ciel.
Arcs-en-ciel.
Okay.
So we're usually focusing on the main noun in that hyphenated duo.
Exactly.
Are there any cases where both parts of the word might change? You know, just keep things interesting?
There are a few exceptions, especially with words where both nouns are equally important.
Right. So they both deserve to be pluralized.
Exactly. And in those cases, you might want to double check with a dictionary or a grammar guide.
Okay, so it's like a grammar detective game sometimes. You know, we've covered so much in this deep dive. And I have to say, I'm feeling a lot more confident about tackling those French plurals and agreement.
That's great to hear.
It's really amazing how breaking down these concepts and understanding the why behind the rules makes such a difference.
It does. And remember, this is just the beginning.
Right.
There's always more to learn, but with the right tools and a curious mind, you can keep exploring and mastering this beautiful language.
Absolutely. And speaking of tools, a huge thank you to the Pronunciator app for making this whole grammar learning process so engaging and fun.
It's a great resource.
It is. With those interactive exercises and the clear explanations, it's like having a personal French tutor.
It really is.
So if you're looking to master plural nouns in agreement, Pronunciator is definitely your secret weapon.
Absolutely. And remember, practice is key.
It is. Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of French plurals in agreement.
We did it!
We did. We hope you've enjoyed this adventure as much as we have.
And keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Au revoir.